Welcome to subscribe. Continually we updated.
You know those moments when someone says something so casually cruel that it takes your brain a few seconds to even register it? Like a paper cut, you don't feel it right away, but then it stings for days. That was my Friday afternoon, 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before I was supposed to pick up my son from his aunt's house. Bill Patterson called me into his office. The one with the football helmet on the shelf and that damn clock that's been 5 minutes slow since before I started working here 6 years ago. He was leaning back in his chair, the one that squeaks like a dying mouse every time he moves, and he had that look on his face. You know the look. The "I've got something to tell you and you're not gonna like it" look. "Elena," he said, spreading his hands like he was about to explain the rules of a game I didn't know we were playing, "you've done solid work on the Morrison account. Real solid." I stood there with my laptop bag on my shoulder, keys already in my hand. "Thanks, Bill. Listen, I've gotta pick up Maddie, so if this can wait, this can't wait." He pointed at the chair across from his desk. "Sit down. This is important." That's when I noticed the other guy in the room. Young, maybe late 20s, sitting in the corner like he was trying to hide but also wanted to be seen. Blonde hair, too much gel, wearing a blazer that still had the crease marks from being folded in a store shelf. He smiled at me with too many teeth. "You know my nephew, Tucker," Bill said. It wasn't a question. "He's been with us about 3 months now. Learning the ropes. Good kid. Hungry." I knew Tucker. Everyone knew Tucker. He'd been floating around the office since January, shadowing people, which mostly meant standing too close at the coffee machine and telling stories about his glory days at some sales job where he supposedly broke records. Nobody had ever verified those records. Nobody had tried. "Here's the thing," Bill said, and he leaned forward now, elbows on his desk, the football helmet watching me from behind him like a referee about to make a bad call. "The Morrison renewal is coming up. It's the biggest contract in our region. $17 million over 3 years. And I've been thinking about the client." "What about them?" "They're old school." He said it like that explained everything. "Manufacturing guys. They drink beer, they watch football, they make jokes that'd get you cancelled on Twitter. And look, you're great, Elena. Your work is great. Your attention to detail? Top notch. But the client." He paused, searching for the words, and then he found them. "The client trusts men more." There it was. That paper cut. I didn't say anything for maybe 10 seconds. The slow clock ticked. The chair squeaked. Tucker shifted in the corner like a kid waiting for his turn to speak in class. "I'm sorry," I finally said, "I want to make sure I understand this. I've managed the Morrison account for 4 years. I've met every deadline, stayed within budget on 17 separate projects, and last quarter their CEO sent us a handwritten note saying we were their most valuable partner. And now you're telling me," "I'm telling you," Bill cut in, his voice getting that edge it always gets when someone doesn't immediately agree with him, "that Tucker here is going to take lead on the Morrison renewal. And I want you to train him. Train him. He needs to learn the account from the ground up. The history, the relationships, the proposal framework, everything. He'll be the face, and you'll be the architect behind the scenes." I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I was going to do something I couldn't take back, and I've got a 10-year-old who needs a mom with a job and health insurance. "So I do all the work," I said, "and he gets the credit." "Come on, don't be like that. This isn't about credit. This is about strategy. It's about knowing your client. It's about playing the long game." Bill leaned back again, satisfied with his logic. "Tucker's got the relationship building skills. He's got that thing. The likability factor. You'll build the house, he'll sell it. Team effort." Tucker finally spoke. "Elena, I'm really excited to learn from you. I've heard amazing things about your work. "This is gonna be great, we're gonna crush it together." He said crush it like he'd practiced it in the mirror. And honestly, I think a fresh approach could really energize the account. Bring some new energy, you know? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This kid couldn't pick the Morrison account out of a lineup. He didn't know that the client's procurement director had a daughter with a rare medical condition, and we'd adjusted our entire delivery schedule around her treatment. He didn't know that the Morrison warehouse manager hated email and only responded to phone calls made before 7 a.m. He didn't know that the entire $17 million deal was held together by 43 specific promises I'd made and kept over 4 years. And he was going to crush it. 1 month, Bill said. 31 days until the bid submission window opens. You train him, you prep the proposal together, and then we present as a unified front. After that, assuming we win, and we will win, Tucker takes over as lead on Morrison, and you move to the next big thing. I'm thinking the Phoenix expansion could use someone with your skills. Someone with my skills. Notice how that works? My skills are valuable when he needs something built. But when it's time to stand in front of the client, suddenly my skills don't matter because I don't have the right chromosomes. You want to know the worst part? I almost said yes. 6 years at this company, and I almost nodded my head and went back to my desk and started putting together training materials for this gel-haired child. Because that's what women do, right? We adapt. We compromise. We prove ourselves twice as hard and expect half the credit. We tell ourselves it's just the way things are, and maybe next time, maybe when the next boss comes along, maybe when we've put in another year. But I was standing there, key still in my hand, and I could see Maddie's face in my head. My son, who asks me every week why I'm the only mom at his baseball games who doesn't have a husband or a dad helping out. My son, who once told his teacher that his mom builds things with numbers. My son, who was waiting for me right now at his aunt's house, probably eating Cheez-Its straight from the box and watching YouTube videos about how to fix lawn mowers. What was I supposed to tell him? That I let some man in a wrinkled blazer take something I'd built with 4 years of my life because the client trusts men more? Okay, I said. My voice came out calm. Calmer than I felt. I'll train him. Bill's face broke into a grin. That's what I like to hear. Team player. I knew you'd understand, Elena. I told Tucker here, I said, Elena's a pro. She gets the big picture. But I want something clear, I said. All the work product stays in my name until we're ready to present. Every document, every backup file, every data set, they all carry my digital signature. When Tucker presents, he presents from materials I've approved. Sure. Bill waved his hand. Whatever you need. The important thing is we're all pulling in the same direction. Tucker nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. 100%. Same direction. I turned and walked out of the office. The slow clock said 5:02. It was actually 5:07. That night, after Maddie was asleep, after we'd eaten frozen pizza and he'd told me about how he fixed the neighbor's sprinkler head with a paperclip and some electrical tape, and I'd told him that was smart thinking, that was good problem solving, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the Morrison account files. All of them. For years of work, organized down to the pixel. I started backing everything up to a personal drive, one file at a time. The client communication logs. The proposal templates. The pricing models. The 43 promises, categorized, tracked, annotated with notes about who said what and when. And then I opened the procurement portal for Morrison Industries. It's a public system, anyone can access it if they know where to look. I'd been using it for years. I knew every screen, every requirement, every hidden checkbox that could disqualify a bidder if they didn't know what they were doing. I clicked through to the upcoming contract renewal page. The bid submission window opened in exactly 31 days. There was a section called Bidder Qualification Requirements that most people just skimmed. I read it carefully. Then I read it again. The fifth requirement said, all bidding entities must designate a primary project lead with verifiable, documented history of managing contracts of equivalent scope and value. This individual must have a minimum of 5 years of direct client management experience in the industrial manufacturing sector. The primary project lead's professional credentials will be publicly displayed during the final bid evaluation process. 5 years. Tucker had 3 months of shadowing and a sales record nobody could verify. I sat there in my kitchen, the only light coming from my laptop screen and the little nightlight in the hallway outside Maddie's room. The old F-150 in the driveway, the one I'd been trying to fix for 3 years, sat silent under the Texas stars. I started building something. Not a revenge plan, I don't believe in revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge makes you sloppy. I started building a bridge. A way out. A way forward. Over the next 2 weeks, I trained Tucker. I built him a manual, 300 pages of everything he needed to know about the Morrison account. I walked him through the client's history, showed him how to navigate the procurement portal, explained the 43 promises and why each one mattered. He showed up late to 6 of those training sessions. He took notes on his phone, which meant he was texting half the time. Once, he asked me if we could skip the technical stuff because he was more of a big-picture guy. Every night, I went home and worked on my own thing. Building the proposal that I knew the Morrison account actually needed. Gathering my credentials. Documenting every project I'd ever managed. The 43 promises expanded into a complete project methodology that I'd developed over 4 years of trial and error. I contacted some people. Quietly. A former client contact who'd moved to Morrison's compliance department. A procurement specialist I'd met at a conference 3 years ago who now worked at Morrison Industries. Maggie Chen, from our own company's audit office. I didn't tell her what I was doing, but I asked her some very specific questions about how the bid evaluation process worked at the corporate level. Interesting questions, she'd said, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. You thinking of bidding independently? I'm thinking of understanding the rules, I said. Just want to know what I'm up against. The rules are clear, she said. The system doesn't care about relationships. It cares about documentation. If someone doesn't meet the minimum qualifications, they don't get through. Period. I've seen it happen to bigger companies than ours. 3 weeks in, Bill asked me how the training was going. Great, I said. Tucker's learning fast. Bill nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I just got off the phone with Morrison's regional director. He's excited to meet Tucker. Thinks some young blood might be exactly what the account needs. The regional director. Not the people running the procurement process. Not the compliance team evaluating the bids. The regional director, who probably plays golf with Bill and doesn't have a say in the technical qualification review. 1 week to go, Bill said. You ready to make this company proud? I smiled. Absolutely. I didn't tell him that I'd already registered my own consulting company. I didn't tell him that I'd submitted my credentials for pre-qualification through the Morrison procurement portal. I didn't tell him that I'd spent every night for 3 weeks building a proposal that was better than anything our company had ever submitted, because it had to be. Because when you're a woman in a man's game, you don't get to be good. You have to be undeniable. On day 30, I walked into Bill's office and put my resignation letter on his desk. What's this? He looked genuinely confused. My 2 weeks' notice. Actually, let's make it effective immediately. You can't do this. The bid is tomorrow. I've done everything you asked. Tucker's trained. The proposal is ready. He's got 300 pages of my work to present. He should be fine. I paused. Unless he needs to actually understand it. Elena, this is unprofessional. This is me understanding the rules you forgot, I said. Good luck tomorrow, Bill. Tell Tucker I said to crush it. I walked out. The slow clock on his wall said 4:55. It was actually 5 o'clock exactly. For once, something in that office was right on time. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck for a minute. The F-150 rumbled to life. I'd finally fixed the engine 2 weeks ago. Funny, how you find the energy to fix things when you know you're about to need them. I drove home. Maddie was waiting. Tomorrow, he'd go to school, and I'd go to a bid presentation, not as an employee of Bill Patterson's company, but as the founder of Vasquez Consulting, LLC. The screen would show the names. The system would do its work. And the system, unlike Bill, doesn't care if you're a man. It just cares if you're qualified. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning, not because I was nervous, but because Maddie had a soccer game at 8 and I needed to get him out the door before I could even think about the bid presentation. I made your lunch, Mijo. Ham sandwich, no crust, like you like. Thanks, Mom. You have that big meeting today? Yeah. Big meeting. I kissed his forehead. Go get your cleats on. He ran off, and I poured myself coffee in a travel mug. The F-150 rumbled when I started it, smooth and steady. That engine used to knock so bad I thought it would die on the freeway. But I fixed it. Finally. I dropped Maddie at the field and watched him jog over to his teammates, shin guards flopping. Then I pointed the truck toward the Morrison Industries campus on the west side of Houston. The bid guidelines said on-site check-in started at 9 sharp. You had to be there with your company credentials, proof of insurance, and your lead's professional qualification packet. I had all of that. I'd spent the past month making sure I had more than enough. See, after Bill told me to train Tucker 3 weeks ago, I didn't just smile and take it. The first thing I did was go home and open my laptop. I went into the Morrison Industries supplier portal, the back end, where approved vendors upload their team BIOS for pre-qualification. I still had access because I'd been managing that account for 6 years. I pulled every project record, every performance review, every single metric that proved I'd been the one running this account. Morrison's system logs everything. Timestamps, user IDs, version histories. Then I called Maggie Chin. Not to complain. Not to ask for help. Just to ask a question. Maggie, it's Elena Vasquez. Quick question about the new bid rules for Morrison. Which part? She said, typing in the background. The section about lead qualifiers. Does it say 5 years of direct client management experience or 5 years with the bidding firm? Direct client management. Doesn't matter where you got it. It's about the person, not the company. Thanks. That's all I needed. She didn't ask why. Maggie never asked why. That's why I liked her. I printed everything that night. Every email, every contract amendment I'd written, every quarterly review where Bill had noted my excellent client relationship. I scanned them all into PDFs. Then I filled out the pre-qualification form as Elena Vasquez, Principal Consultant, Vasquez Consulting, LLC. Yes, I'd registered the LLC 2 days after Bill's little speech. When you're a single mom who's been talked down to for 15 years, you learn to move fast when someone gives you a reason. The Morrison portal let me submit my qualification packet directly to the evaluation committee. Not through procurement. Not through Bill. Through the actual people who run the bidding process. Because one thing Bill never understood about this client, they're an engineering firm. They worship process. They built their entire company on checklists and quality gates. If the system says you need a certified lead with 5 years provable experience, then you show up with that or you don't show up at all. I pulled into the Morrison campus parking lot at 8:40. The visitors center is a big glass building with a lobby that echoes. I signed in at the front desk, showed my driver's license, and took the badge that said Vendor Bid Presentation. The woman at the counter looked at her screen. Vasquez Consulting, correct? You're in conference room C down the hall, second door on the left. Thank you. I walked past the coffee station. And there he was. Bill Patterson. Standing in the hallway with Tucker, both of them wearing navy suits that probably cost more than my truck. Tucker was holding a binder that looked way too thin to be a full proposal. Bill saw me and stopped mid-sentence. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Elena? What the hell are you doing here? Same thing you are, Bill. Bid presentation. Tucker squinted at me like I'd said something in Spanish. Wait, what? I thought you quit. I did. I just didn't quit the industry. Bill's face went from confused to angry in about 2 seconds. You're here as a competitor? You've got to be kidding me. I'm not kidding. I held up my vendor badge. I'm pre-qualified. Through the standard portal. Ask Morrison if you don't believe me. You walked out yesterday. You can't possibly have a full proposal. I didn't need to build one from scratch, Bill. I've been running this account for 6 years. Every solution I pitched to Morrison last quarter was my work. My analysis, my designs, my cost models. I just took them with me. You stole company property. Nope. I recreated my own intellectual contributions using publicly available bid specs and my personal qualifications. Talk to your legal team. They'll tell you it's clean. Tucker looked at his uncle like a dog who'd just heard a strange noise. What's she talking about? Shut up, Tucker. Bill took a step closer to me, lowering his voice. You think you're going to walk in there and take this account away from me? I've known the Morrison people for 10 years. You've known them on golf courses. I've known them in budget meetings. We'll see which one matters more today. Before he could answer, a woman's voice came over the lobby speakers. Good morning, vendors. This is Janet Okonkwo, Morrison's Chief Procurement Officer. Per our updated bidding standards, all lead qualifiers will now undergo a mandatory credential verification. We need to review each lead's direct client management history and comparable project list before any team is allowed to present. Please proceed to your assigned conference rooms. Verification will begin in 10 minutes. Bill's face lost a little color. I could see him doing the math. Tucker Patterson. Direct client management experience? None. Comparable projects? Crickets. The binder in Tucker's hands was probably full of my old slides with the dates swapped out. Bill, I said quietly, you should have read the new bid manual. They changed the qualification requirements 6 months ago. I tried to tell you 3 times. You were too busy telling me clients trust men more. I turned and walked toward conference room C. Behind me, I heard Tucker say, Uncle Bill, what's she mean by credential verification? I thought you said my resume was good enough. Your resume is fine. We just need to, we'll figure it out. Sure you will, I thought. In conference room C, there were 3 other vendors waiting. I recognized 2 of them from industry events. A guy from Dallas I'd worked with years ago nodded at me like he wasn't surprised to see me alone. A woman from a big consulting firm gave me a tight smile. We were all competitors, but we were also survivors. We knew what it took to sit in that chair. The Morrison evaluators came in right at 9. 3 people in gray suits, each carrying a tablet that was linked to the central bid tracking system. The lead evaluator, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, stood at the front of the room. Good morning. As Janet mentioned, we're running credential verification first. Each lead will be called to the front to present their qualification packet. We'll be cross-referencing your experience with our internal project records. Any lead who cannot demonstrate 5 years of direct client management and at least 3 comparable implementations will be disqualified. The system updates in real time. If you're disqualified, your company name will be removed from the bid screen immediately. A screen on the wall lit up. The current shortlist showed 6 companies, including Patterson Strategic Solutions and Vasquez Consulting. The evaluator started calling names. One by one, leads went up, showed their portfolios, answered questions. 2 were asked to sit down because their project lists didn't match Morrison's records. Their company names vanished from the screen. Then, Patterson Strategic Solutions. Tucker Patterson, please come forward. Tucker stood up in the back of the room. I realized he and Bill had followed me into conference room C after the lobby announcement. He walked to the front like a man walking into a classroom where he hadn't done the homework. Mr. Patterson, we need to see evidence of 5 years of direct client management experience, specifically in midstream logistics, the evaluator said. Direct client management, I have, all of my roles have been client-facing. Tucker opened his thin binder. I've got experience at 3 different sales firms, and at Patterson Strategic Solutions as a senior account executive for weeks now. At those previous firms, what was your total direct management of a logistics client account? Could you walk us through one project where you were the lead decision maker for budget, scope, and delivery? Well, budgets are very fluid concepts. I'd say my biggest strength is relationship-driven communication. I don't get into the weeds on budgets, but I do a lot of high-level. Mr. Patterson, our system shows 0 records of you being listed as a primary client manager on any Morrison project. Can you clarify? Tucker looked back at Bill, who was standing against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. You know, I'm newer to this specific account, but my team, we have a lot of collective knowledge. My uncle, Mr. Patterson, has decades of experience, and we'd be collaborating on, the evaluator interrupted, his voice completely neutral. The qualification requirement is for the named bid lead, not the team. If you cannot demonstrate the required direct experience, Patterson Strategic Solutions will be disqualified. But she trained me. Tucker pointed at me. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. The evaluator looked at Tucker, then at me, then back at Tucker. Who trained you is irrelevant. The requirement is your own documented experience. Tucker opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Bill stepped forward. Look, my name is Bill Patterson. I'm the regional VP. I've been working with Morrison for over a decade. My nephew is new to the lead role, but I'll be overseeing every single decision. Can we make an exception? The lead evaluator didn't even blink. Mr. Patterson, Morrison doesn't make exceptions on qualification requirements. It's a matter of compliance and audit standards. If we make an exception for one vendor, we compromise the integrity of the entire bidding process. On the screen, Patterson Strategic Solutions' name started blinking. Then it disappeared. Your company has been disqualified from this bid, the evaluator said. Thank you for your participation. Please exit the conference room. Bill didn't move. He stared at the screen like his brain couldn't process what had just happened. Tucker was still standing at the front, binder hanging open, all my old charts barely visible on the pages. Uncle Bill? Let's go, Tucker. Bill's voice was hoarse. He turned and walked out. Tucker scrambled after him. The door closed behind them. Next, the evaluator said calmly. Elena Vasquez. Vasquez Consulting. I stood up. I had my laptop bag on one shoulder, a folder with all my printed documentation in my hand. My heart was beating hard, but my hands were steady. I walked to the front of the room. Good morning. I'm Elena Vasquez. I've been the primary client manager for Morrison's midstream accounts since 2018. In my folder, you'll find project summaries for each fiscal year, signed quarterly reviews from the client side, and a crosswalk showing my direct responsibility for budgets, scope, and delivery on 3 major implementations comparable to this bid. I handed over the folder. The evaluator opened it, scanned a few pages, and then typed something on his tablet. The screen flickered. Vasquez Consulting remained. And right next to it, under lead qualification status, a green checkmark appeared. Ms. Vasquez, your qualification is confirmed. You'll proceed to the presentation round at 11. Thank you. I walked back to my seat. The woman from the big consulting firm leaned over. Did you really train that guy? Yeah. And he thought she trained me was a qualification? I shrugged. Some people think loud equals capable. She smiled a little and turned back to her notes. I looked at the screen again. Vasquez Consulting, solid and green. Bill's company wasn't on there anymore. He was probably out in the parking lot right now, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. But he wouldn't figure it out. Because in Bill's mind, the rules were always for other people. The evaluator finished with the remaining vendors. The screen settled on 4 names. 4 companies, 1 bid. And mine was the smallest, the newest, the one-man shop. But I was qualified. And that's what the system cared about. The walk from the conference room to the parking garage felt longer than it should have. My heels clicked on the concrete, and I kept my breathing steady the way I'd taught myself back when I was still pregnant with Maddie and scared of everything. 1 breath in, 1 breath out, let it go, let it go. The presentation went fine. That's all I'll say about that. Not great, not terrible, fine. I'd built the whole proposal around something Bill's team never figured out because they kept running on his nephew's training wheels. Morrison didn't want the same recycled solution wrapped in a louder voice. They wanted someone who knew their distribution network down to the last forklift in the warehouse. Someone who'd walked it. Someone who'd sat in their break room at 3 a.m. during a system migration and eaten stale donuts with their night shift. I was that someone. Bill never understood that. To him, client relationships were steak dinners and football tickets. To me, they were showing up when the air conditioning broke and not complaining, because the guy across the table remembered who actually fixed the problem. The garage smelled like hot tires and damp concrete. I was halfway to my truck when I heard him. Elena. Bill's voice echoed between the parked cars, loud and broken at the edges, like a radio station that was losing its signal. I kept walking. You did this, he shouted, and his footsteps got closer. You went behind my back, you planned this whole thing, you set me up. I stopped and turned around. He was standing about 10 feet away, his tie loosened, his face red like he'd been running upstairs. Tucker stood behind him, looking at the ground, trying very hard to disappear. That stupid Mustang of his was parked nearby, but his engine was definitely not the one making all the noise right now. I didn't plan anything, Bill, I said. I just read the rules. The rules. He almost laughed, except it came out like a cough. The rules. You want to talk about rules? You were my employee. You trained my nephew. You were supposed to be part of my team, and the second you walked out that door, you turned around and stabbed me in the back. I set my bag down on the hood of my truck, my old F-150, the one I'd finally got running again 2 weeks ago, after 3 years of telling myself I'd fix it someday. I'd replaced the fuel pump myself, watched 4 YouTube videos, got grease under my nails that didn't wash out for a week. Felt good. Bill, let me tell you something about that training manual I left you. He blinked. What? The 300 pages I put together for Tucker. You remember that. You told me to document everything I knew so he could step into the role seamlessly. Those were your words. So? So I did exactly what you asked. I documented every process, every workflow, every client communication protocol I'd built over 6 years. Down to the font sizes on the weekly reports. I pulled my keys out of my pocket and ran my thumb over the worn Ford logo. But here's the thing about processes, Bill. They're like a truck engine. If you don't understand why the parts connect the way they do, you can read the manual 100 times and you'll still be stuck on the side of the highway when something goes wrong. Tucker finally looked up. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, then closed again. Smartest decision he'd made in weeks. You set me up, Bill said again, but quieter now. You gave him bad information. No. I gave him complete information. Every single thing I knew. And that was the problem. I leaned against the truck door, letting the cool metal press into my back. You know how many times I tried to tell you that the Morrison contract was too complicated to hand off in 4 weeks? You know how many times you told me clients trust men more and that Tucker just needed the basics? You didn't want him to understand the work. You wanted him to perform the work. There's a difference. Bill's face twisted. In the dim garage light, he looked older than 55. He looked like a man who'd spent 30 years building a house on sand and just heard the tide coming in. The system, I continued, the one you keep saying you hate because it's too bureaucratic, that system is the only reason I'm standing here right now. When I left, I didn't steal your clients. I didn't badmouth you to Morrison. I went to their vendor portal, I submitted my qualifications, and I let the system do what systems do. It compared Tucker's 0 years of direct client management to my 6. It checked his certification records against mine. It looked at the facts, Bill. Not the relationships. Not the golf games. Not whose nephew you're trying to get promoted. You went to Maggie Chen, he said, and the accusation came out like a final desperate swing. You got her to help you. I shook my head. Maggie didn't help me beat you. Maggie helped me understand what the rules already said. I called her the week after I left and asked one question: does my project history belong to the company, or to me? You know what she told me? She said, Elena, your professional qualifications are yours. Always have been. It's in the vendor integrity policy, page 42, paragraph 3. I paused, letting the number sink in. Page 42. I'd read it. She'd read it. Bill probably hadn't opened that manual since the day corporate emailed it out, and he forwarded it to his assistant with a note saying file. So all that time, I said, when you were calling me into your office telling me clients trusted men more, when you were patting Tucker on the back and telling him he was a natural, you were building a house without a foundation. You thought the rules were optional. You thought your 30 years of handshakes would override a compliance checklist. And today, Bill, that checklist just told everyone in the Morrison conference room that your company didn't meet the minimum requirements. Tucker finally spoke up, his voice cracking like a kid whose growth spurt hadn't settled yet. She trained me. I told them she trained me. That should count for something. It counts for exactly nothing, I said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. Because training isn't experience, Tucker. And the system knows the difference. Bill stepped closer, and for a second I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected, not anger, not even defeat. Confusion. Genuine, bottom-of-the-barrel confusion. Like he'd woken up speaking a language nobody else understood anymore. How did you do this so fast? He asked. 31 days. You couldn't have. Couldn't have what? Registered an LLC? That takes about an hour online if you have your documents ready. Pulled my project records? They were all in the system under my name, Bill. You never thought to lock me out because you never thought I'd use them. You thought I'd go home, feel sorry for myself, maybe write a bad review on Glassdoor and call it a day. I picked up my bag and opened the truck door. The interior light came on, warm and yellow, and I could see Maddie's soccer ball in the passenger seat, still covered in grass stains from Saturday's game. But here's what you never understood about me, I said, one hand on the door frame. I built this book of business. Not you. Not Tucker. Me. I was the one who flew to Houston on a Sunday because Morrison's warehouse management system crashed and their ops director needed someone to troubleshoot in person. I was the one who sat through 3 rounds of budget reviews and cut my own proposal margins because their CFO was getting pressure from the board. I did all of that. And you stood in the end zone and spiked the ball like you'd run the whole field yourself. He had no answer to that. None. The man who always had a sports metaphor, always had a joke, always had a way to make himself the hero, he just stood there, shoulders slumped, mouth slightly open, a statue of everything that had stopped working. The name on the screen today, I said, was never about revenge. I didn't put Vasquez Consulting on that bid list to hurt you. I put it there because I deserved to be there. Because I've been doing this work for years, and the only person who ever told me I wasn't good enough was you. I climbed into the truck and shut the door. The engine turned over smooth and strong, the way a freshly repaired engine should. Through the windshield, I could see Bill still standing in the same spot, Tucker hovering behind him like a shadow that didn't know where to fall. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't have anything else to say. Some conversations end because they've run out of words, and some end because one person finally realizes there were never any real words to begin with. The drive home took 40 minutes. I took the long way on purpose, windows down, radio tuned to the classic rock station Maddie hated. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, and I could see his silhouette through the living room window, playing video games when he should have been finishing his science project. "Mom. You're back." He met me at the door, all 10-year-old energy and grass-stained knees. "How'd it go? Did you win?" I hung my keys on the hook by the door and ruffled his hair. "I didn't lose, kiddo. That's the important part." "What does that even mean?" "It means I'm taking you to that burger place you like. The one with the fried pickles." His eyes lit up. "The one on Shepherd?" "That's the one. Go wash your hands. And bring me your science project before we leave. I want to see how far you got." He groaned but ran off toward his room. I stood in the kitchen for a minute, looking at the stack of mail on the counter, the half-finished grocery list, the photo of me and Maddie at Galveston Beach last summer, both of us sunburned and grinning. Tomorrow I'd need to finalize the Morrison contract details. Next week I'd need to start scouting for a second client, maybe even think about hiring someone part-time if the workload kept growing. There were invoices to send, a vendor profile to update, 1,000 small tasks that came with running a one-person shop. But tonight, there was a burger with fried pickles and a science project about volcanoes that probably needed parental intervention. Tonight, there was a 10-year-old who didn't know or care about office politics or qualification screens or men who thought client trust was a gender thing. He'd learn, someday, that the world could be unfair. But he'd also learn, because I'd make sure of it, that sometimes the system got it right. Sometimes the screen showed the name of the person who actually did the work. And when that happened, it was worth celebrating. I grabbed my bag and checked my phone one last time. There was an email from Maggie Chen, sent 20 minutes ago, subject line, Morrison final recommendation. I opened it, read the first line, and felt a smile spread across my face. I'd tell Maddie in the car. Or maybe over dessert. Or maybe I'd save it for tomorrow morning, when the sun was up and the whole day stretched out ahead of us, full of everything I'd built and everything still to come. But for now, I heard his footsteps pounding down the hallway and his voice calling, "Mom, I can't find my volcano poster," and I put my phone away and turned toward the sound of my very ordinary, very hard-won life. "Check under your bed," I called back. "And if it's not there, we're checking mine." Some things you build yourself. Some things you rebuild. And some things, like a 10-year-old's lost homework, you just help them find. Outside, the neighborhood had settled into its evening quiet. A dog barked somewhere 2 streets over, probably Tucker's, still at it. The automatic sprinklers kicked on across the street, and the smell of wet grass drifted through the open kitchen window. I'd fixed the truck. I'd fixed my career. And as Maddie came racing into the kitchen waving a crumpled poster board, I realized I'd fixed something else too, that part of me that had been waiting for someone else to tell me I was allowed to succeed. Nobody needed to tell me anymore. I'd put my own name on the screen. And it was staying there.